Early morning in Houston. Wisps of clouds drifted lazily above George Bush Intercontinental Airport, where thousands of travelers rushed through security lines to begin their journeys. Among them was a woman who walked quietly, yet carried unmistakable presence. Naomi Ellison, one of the most powerful venture capitalists in the United States. No one paid attention to the woman in a simple fur-lined coat, her hair neatly tied back, face bare of makeup, walking with a 12-year-old girl at her side. That girl was Aria Ellison, Naomi's daughter. With a deep purple backpack slung over her shoulder, a birthday gift from her mother, Aria walked beside Naomi, curiously observing the bustling terminal while trying to keep pace. "You'll be okay?" Naomi asked softly, her voice calm and warm, though a flicker of concern showed in her eyes. A booking system glitch had separated their seats. Naomi had been assigned a seat in first class, needing the quiet for an important investment call, while Aria would be seated in Economy Plus. "I'll be fine. You already taught me how to be confident when I travel alone." Aria smiled, though a trace of nervousness lingered in her eyes. "Besides, you'll come find me. We'll just be apart for a little bit." Naomi leaned down, gently brushing her daughter's soft curls. "I'll come over as soon as the call's done. Should only be 30 minutes. Then a kiss on Aria's forehead. "If anyone gives you trouble, just call me. I'll be there in a heartbeat." They parted ways at the junction where first class and economy split into separate boarding lanes. Naomi stepped forward like any luxury traveler. No entourage, no fanfare. Few knew that the woman boarding quietly was the force behind dozens of startups and billions in assets through Ellison Capital, the investment firm she had built from the ground up. Meanwhile, Aria, petite in stature and wrapped in a thick ash-grey coat, disappeared into the stream of Economy Plus passengers. She found her seat, 22B, and carefully placed her beloved backpack in the overhead compartment. Everything seemed normal, just another travel day like any other. But what she didn't know was that in the cold, cramped cabin light, a pair of eyes had already locked onto her, watching with a quiet, calculating suspicion. Eyes that would later turn this flight into something far more than routine. Eyes that would mark the beginning of a battle unlike any the airline industry had ever seen. And so, Atheris Air Flight 217 from Houston to Seattle began to roll down the runway. Not just another scheduled flight, but the opening move in a transformation that would rewrite history in aviation. The cabin door sealed shut with a cold, familiar click. Passengers began settling into their seats. A faint whistle, the sharp tug of seatbelts, the mechanical greetings of the flight crew echoed through the intercom. Amid it all, Aria Ellison fumbled with the zipper of her backpack, trying to retrieve the comic book she was halfway through. At the rear of the cabin, Elise Gardner, lead flight attendant for the Economy Plus section, paused the moment she spotted Aria. Not because the girl was causing a disturbance, not because she was doing anything wrong, but simply because Aria didn't fit what Elise was used to seeing in seat 22B. A young black girl in a worn grey coat, but carrying a rare, high-end designer backpack. A Louisette monogram, the kind only truly wealthy people could afford. Elise narrowed her gaze. She stepped forward lightly, but her mind was already swirling with instinctive suspicion. Fake, stolen, hand-me-down from someone else? Nowhere in her thought process was the possibility that this girl could be the daughter of a billionaire. Elise took the passenger manifest from a colleague and scanned the list. She saw the name Naomi Ellison listed in first class. but there was no note indicating any relation to the child in Economy Plus. No shared surname. No notation for child traveling with adult. Elise frowned, her eyes beginning to squint. Meanwhile, Aria remained engrossed in her comic book, unaware that the woman watching her wasn't observing with concern, but with quiet, growing prejudice. From a row behind, a white middle-aged woman wearing headphones caught Elise's movement. She sensed the tension in the flight attendant's posture, but said nothing. Like many others in the cabin, she simply watched, waiting to see what would happen. Elise took a slow breath, straightened her uniform, and began walking directly toward seat 22B, where a 12-year-old girl was about to face her first challenge. One she had no idea was coming. That first glance wasn't just a look, it was judgment, it was suspicion, and it was the beginning of discrimination. Before the plane had even left the ground, Aria had just placed her beloved purple backpack into the overhead bin above her seat. It was a birthday gift from her mother the year before, not something Aria had begged for, but something her mother gave her, saying, "Because you've worked hard and you care about others." She adjusted the straps carefully, her fingers smoothing the soft leather. It was her pride, but that pride was quickly shattered by a sharp voice behind her. "Is that bag yours?" Elise Gardner stood right behind her. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried just enough bite to make passengers across 3 rows lift their heads. Aria turned and nodded gently. "Yes, ma'am." "Let me see your ticket," Elise said, holding out her hand, her suspicion undisguised. Aria fumbled through her coat pocket. A few papers slipped out. She scrambled to gather them, hands trembling. There it was, her boarding pass, seat 22B, the right place. Elise glanced quickly at it, then looked up at the backpack, repeating her question. "And this bag is yours?" Her voice emphasized yours, as though questioning the legitimacy of a child owning something of value. Aria nodded again, slower this time. "My mum gave it to me. It was a birthday gift." "Where's your mother?" "She's in first class. She said she has a business call, but she's going to switch seats after." Elise didn't respond. She just shook her head slightly, then, without warning, reached up and pulled the backpack from the bin. Passengers nearby turned their faces away, pretending not to see. A few flinched, but no one intervened. "This bag doesn't belong in this section," Elise said coldly. "I'll store it somewhere else." "But there's space up there." Aria pointed softly, her voice catching. "I don't make the rules. I enforce them. And if you keep arguing, I'll call security and have you removed from the plane. Is that what you want?" The threat was whispered, but it landed like a blade against Aria's chest. She lowered her head, silent. Elise carried the backpack, the small, proud symbol of love and effort, down the aisle like a suspicious item. No one stopped her. No one asked why. Aria sat down, fingers twisted tightly in her lap, her chest tight. She didn't understand what had just happened. She had followed every rule. The bin was empty. She hadn't made noise. She hadn't broken anything. So why was she being questioned? Why didn't her bag belong? And, if it wasn't the bag, was it her skin? The plane hadn't even taken off yet. But for Aria, the world had just come crashing down. Naomi Ellison ended her critical investment call earlier than expected. She removed her earpiece, adjusted her coat, and stood from her first-class seat. She had no idea that each step she now took down the aisle was bringing her closer to an explosion, not from the financial markets, but from the heart of a mother. As she moved through the cabin, Naomi slowed when she spotted Aria, her 12-year-old daughter, sitting with her head down, eyes red and swollen. Instantly, she rushed over, kneeling beside the seat. "Aria? What happened, sweetheart?" Aria looked up at her mother, then suddenly burst into tears. Her broken sentences landed like blades. "The flight attendant said I shouldn't have that bag. She yanked it away, said she'd get me kicked off the plane." Naomi snapped her head around. Across the cabin, Elise Gardner stood beside the drink cart, her expression composed, as if nothing had happened. Naomi rose, no yelling, no rush. But her gaze was so cold, passengers nearby instinctively moved out of her way. She walked toward Elise, each step a drumbeat of silent fury. When they stood face to face, Naomi spoke, not loudly, but every word cut like a scalpel. "Are you the one who touched my daughter's belongings?" Elise didn't flinch. She smiled thinly, like a sheet of paper. "We're simply following policy. That bag didn't seem appropriate for the section she's seated in." Naomi's brow tightened. Inappropriate? How? Size? Material? Or was it because you don't believe a black child could own an expensive backpack? The air in the cabin froze. Some passengers turned away. Others began to listen closely. Just then, Marcus Trent, the flight's chief purser, arrived, tension written across his face. "Is there a problem here, Mom?" Naomi turned to Marcus, her voice still composed. "The problem is my daughter was humiliated in front of passengers, profiled over her bag and the color of her skin. And this woman right here took her backpack without any legitimate reason." Marcus glanced at Elise, then back at Naomi, arms crossed. "Mom, passengers are not allowed to disrupt or challenge flight crew decisions regarding security or operations. If you're unsatisfied, you may file a complaint after the flight." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "I'm filing it right now, and I'm demanding a formal apology, immediately, from both Elise and your crew." Marcus replied coolly, "We will not issue an apology where no wrongdoing occurred. If you continue to interrupt the flight, we may be forced to remove you." Nearby, an elderly white woman hesitantly raised her hand. "I saw what happened. The girl did nothing wrong. The bag fit just fine in the bin and—" "Thank you for your input," Marcus cut in. "We'll make a note of it." Naomi paused for a second. Then she pulled out her phone, turned on the camera and aimed it squarely at Marcus and Elise. "I'd like your names, titles, and employee IDs. I need documentation for the Etheris Air Executive Board." Elise offered a dry smirk, arms crossed. Naomi said nothing more. She turned back to Aria, gently taking her daughter's hand. "I'm here now, and you won't shed another tear." A storm was forming, not loud, not frantic, but the most dangerous kind, the silent fury of someone with power, planning her next move. Naomi Ellison didn't explode the way the crew had expected. She simply remained silent, her gaze sweeping across the cabin with a calmness so chilling it made people uneasy. Aria continued to hold her mother's hand tightly, her eyes still red, but slowly regaining composure in the presence of the woman she had always trusted. Marcus Trent tensed his shoulders, trying to keep his voice even. "If you continue recording or confronting the crew in this manner, we'll have to report this to the captain. Based on the safety assessment, you could be removed from the plane at the nearest stop." Naomi gave a slight nod. "I encourage you to do that." There was no threat in her tone, just a test, a polite invitation laced with quiet menace. Marcus frowned. At that moment, from the front of the cabin, Captain Adrian Holt appeared. A seasoned middle-aged man, His voice carried weight in any emergency. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked, his eyes moving from Naomi and Aria to Elise and Marcus. Elise jumped in quickly. "We have a passenger creating tension over a luggage storage issue. She's refusing to follow crew safety instructions." Naomi stepped forward half a pace, her voice steady, like a CEO addressing a shareholder meeting. "Captain Holt, I'm Naomi Ellison. I just witnessed your crew insult and threaten my 12-year-old daughter because she had a designer backpack, and because she's black." Silence blanketed the cabin. Naomi continued, "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for an apology and an acknowledgement that what happened was wrong. If you can't deliver something that simple, then prepare to answer to the public and to your shareholders." Marcus quickly interjected, "Ma'am, we do not respond to threats. And again, if you continue to disrupt the operation of this flight, we will be forced to contact aviation security." Naomi didn't move. She locked eyes with Captain Holt. "Don't make me be the one to decide for you." From the middle rows, a white passenger spoke up again, this time louder, clearer. "I stand with her. That girl did nothing wrong. I saw it with my own eyes. And this isn't the first time I've seen this kind of behavior from this airline." One passenger nodded, then another. Naomi turned back to Elise and Marcus. "I'll sit down. I won't disrupt your flight. But from this moment on, every word you speak, every move you make, will be monitored. Not by a passenger, but by someone who understands this system and can afford to buy the whole thing if necessary." Captain Holt exhaled, then nodded to let the moment pass. Marcus said nothing more. Elise turned away, but her fist clenched tight at her side. Naomi returned to her seat beside her daughter. No shouting, no spectacle. She simply leaned down and whispered one sentence, just loud enough for Aria and for herself to hear. "The fight has just begun." The airplane cabin sat in a thick, tense silence. Aria leaned her head against her mother's shoulder, her small hand clinging tightly to Naomi's finger, like a lifeline in the middle of a storm. Naomi gently stroked her daughter's hair, her eyes locked ahead. On Elise Gardner, who was pretending to concentrate on making coffee, though her hands were clearly trembling. No one knew what was unfolding in Naomi Ellison's mind. A precise, calculated storm. She wasn't the kind of person who sued every employee for misconduct. She wasn't the kind of mother who made a scene over a confiscated bag. She was the kind of person who would buy the entire system to rewrite the rules. Naomi pulled her phone from her handbag. The screen lit up with a secure internal app, accessible only to the executive board of Ellison Capital. She typed 3 short lines. "Incident on Etheris Air Flight 2279. Begin financial analysis of the airline. Assess acquisition potential. Initiate strategy." Send, no furrowed brow, no outburst. Just fingers gliding effortlessly across a screen, like a tiger moving silently through tall grass before the kill. In the row ahead, Elise turned once more to check on cabin order. But when her eyes met Naomi's, she froze. Naomi was looking at her, director, deep, cold. A subtle smile played at the corner of Naomi's lips. Not friendly. The smile of someone who had made a decision. "Good," Naomi whispered, just low enough that Elise couldn't hear. "I'll see you soon." In a way you never saw coming. Elise turned away. Her back was damp with sweat, and she didn't understand why her heart was pounding so hard. In another world, maybe Naomi Ellison would have stayed silent. But in this world, where she was the first black woman to found a billion-dollar investment firm, where she had once been escorted out of a boardroom for wearing cotton instead of silk, Naomi had learned one thing: to change the rules of the game, you have to own the board, and that little purple backpack had just unknowingly placed the first piece on the table. The plane had just landed in Seattle. Naomi and Aria exited the first-class cabin beneath the mixed stares of curiosity and awkwardness from fellow passengers. Elise Gardner avoided their eyes, busy pretending to organize the drink cart. Marcus Trent remained silent, holding his post-flight checklist, trying to maintain a professional posture. Naomi said nothing. She simply gave Aria's hand a gentle squeeze, as if to say, "Remember how this feels. I won't forget either." As they entered the arrival hall, an airport security officer approached them, voice firm. "Ms. Naomi Ellison and Miss Aria." "That's us. Please come with us. There's a request for a passenger screening related to an incident on Etheris Air Flight 2279. Naomi looked at the man, her expression unchanging. "We didn't cause a disturbance. We were disrespected." "Understood, ma'am. But this is company protocol. We'd appreciate your cooperation." The door to a private room clicked shut behind them. Another agent entered and placed 2 bottles of water on the table, like it was meant to be a polite interrogation. Aria leaned closer to her mother, eyes wide with worry. "Mom, are they arresting us?" Naomi gently shook her head. "No one arrests us, my love. They've just made the mistake of waking the wrong person." As the officer began circling around vague, bureaucratic questions, Naomi opened her tablet. A secure connection linked directly to the Ellison Capital headquarters in Houston. The face of her senior strategy advisor, Adrian Keller, appeared on screen. "Jumping in already, Naomi." "No time to wait," she said, eyes sharp as a razor. "Etheris Air, I want it all. Shareholder structure, buried lawsuits, stock trends, debt ratios, everything. You'll have a preliminary report in 6 hours. But, Naomi, you sure you want to play this game?" "I'm not playing," she said calmly. "I'm rebuilding. From the inside." The call ended. Naomi looked up at the agent across the table, who now seemed unsure of what to even ask. "Are we done here? I have work to do." "And thanks to you. I just got a little more motivated." The agent gave an awkward nod. No evidence, no offense, only one glaring mistake, an airline that had picked the very last person it should have messed with. As they stepped out of the private room, Aria looked up and whispered, "Are you going to sue them, Mom?" Naomi smiled faintly, striding toward the light ahead. "No, sweetheart. I'm going to buy them." 3 a.m. The Ellison Capital headquarters in Houston was still lit up like midday. Naomi Ellison stood before a wall-sized digital display, its blue glow reflecting off her steady, unyielding face. Every data point on Etheris Air, from shareholder structures to loan liabilities, flashed line by line, each one a thread in a collapsing web. Short-term debts above the safety threshold. 3 racial discrimination lawsuits are currently on hold, 2 of which were buried under NDAs, reported Adrian Keller, his voice tight as a wire. Naomi stood with arms crossed, eyes locked on the data. Smell the rot yet? Weak financials, toxic internal culture, a flying empire about to nosedive. However, Adrian hesitated, CEO Charles Vance still holds sway over most of the board. If we go public with a takeover attempt, they'll trigger the poison pill defense immediately. Naomi turned, her gaze like ice. Then we don't go public. The plan began. Within 48 hours, Ellison Capital mobilized 12 shell entities from Switzerland to Singapore to quietly buy shares of Atheris Air on secondary exchanges. Each acquisition was modest, just a few percentage points at a time, but enough to avoid detection. Simultaneously, Naomi convened a private session with her strategic investor network, leaders of pension funds, insurance trusts, and minority business coalitions. Dozens of faces lit up across the screen, from a black CEO of a luxury hotel chain to a former pilot-turned-human rights advisor. Naomi scanned the faces one by one. "I'm not here to appeal for sympathy. I'm here for investment into a future where no one gets stripped of dignity because of their skin. Atheris Air has become a symbol of everything that needs to change, and this is the moment." A beat of silence, then, one after another. "I'm in. Count me in. We're with you." This battle wasn't being fought in the skies, not between a seat number and a designer backpack. It was a war between a decaying system and a rising undercurrent, building force by force, wave by wave. Naomi stepped out onto the balcony. Houston shimmered beneath her feet. She pulled out her phone and opened a photo of Aria in the economy cabin. Red-eyed, that purple backpack slumped under the seat. "This isn't just about us anymore," Naomi murmured. "This is a lesson for an entire industry. And I'm the one teaching the class." At Atheris Air's Seattle headquarters, CEO Charles Vance slammed the latest report onto the table. "What the hell is happening to our stock? Why is trading volume spiking, and no one knows who the buyers are?" His financial aide nervously handed him a fresh breakdown. "Sir, it appears the purchases are coming from a range of smaller investment funds, but when we trace the origins, they're all connected to a private investment network. Indications point to Ellison Capital behind it." A dead silence fell over the boardroom. Charles clenched his fists, voice tight. "Naomi Ellison." The name dropped like a blade. In his mind, the scene replayed, her standing in the aircraft cabin, locking eyes with Elise Gardner, her voice calm, yet cold as steel. He had assumed she was just another difficult passenger in a routine complaint report. Turns out, she was the spark. Meanwhile, in a discreet conference room inside a Los Angeles hotel, Naomi Ellison sat with three key figures. First, Dr. Lydia Harper, a multicultural strategy consultant who had overhauled anti-discrimination policies at a major global hotel chain. Beside her, Victor Hahn, CEO of Polaris Wings, a regional airline once crushed by Atheris's predatory pricing. And at the end of the table, Angela Price, a veteran civil rights attorney who had won landmark discrimination lawsuits in the transportation and public service sectors. Naomi opened her laptop and projected a video onto the wall. Footage captured by a passenger showing Aria being humiliated by Elise and having her backpack seized. "This isn't just evidence," Naomi said. "It's a catalyst." Angela nodded. "I've got 17 former Atheris employees ready to testify they were silenced when reporting racist conduct from superiors." Victor Hahn smirked. "Vance tanked my airline with his not-so-subtle bias against Asian travelers. If you're planning to bring him down, I'll assign my entire analytics team to support." Naomi didn't blink. "We're not here to bring down a man. We're here to change the entire system." 3 days later, a short video clip surfaced on social media. Aria Ellison appeared, sitting in a quiet room, eyes glowing with clarity and resolve. "I'm 12 years old. I was told to move my backpack because it didn't look like it belonged. I cried the whole flight because I thought I did something wrong. But now I know I was right." No one should be treated like that just because they don't match someone else's expectations. The clip was under 2 minutes, but it spread like wildfire. The hashtag number I was Aria swept across Twitter and TikTok. Thousands of people, Black, Asian, LGBTQ+, disabled, began sharing their own stories of being mistreated in air travel. One act of cruelty, one 12-year-old girl, one mother who refused to stay silent. A storm was forming, and its name was justice. Within just 48 hours of Aria Ellison's video going viral, social media had transformed into a wave unlike anything seen before. The hashtag number I was Aria surpassed 50 million mentions in under 3 days. On CNN, a special talk show aired footage of Aria sitting beside her mother, Naomi Ellison, during their first live interview. The host asked, his voice low and serious, "Naomi, if this had happened to anyone else, they might have filed a complaint, stayed silent, fallen into depression. But you're orchestrating the takeover of an entire airline. Why?" Naomi looked directly into the camera. "Because I can. And because I must. If I don't do something now, then when Aria turns 22, she'll still be questioned over a backpack. And I refuse to let that happen." Following the broadcast, Ellison Capital accelerated its efforts. Through proxy investment entities, they now controlled nearly 17% of Etheris Air. Naomi quietly met with small-scale shareholders, people who had never been invited to speak at a boardroom table before. At the same time, in schools, universities, and community centers, a grassroots forum called Aria Talks began to take shape. Open conversations about invisible bias. Minor stories about judgmental glances, suggestive questions, and uneven treatment were finally being spoken aloud. During a peaceful demonstration outside Etheris Air headquarters, civil rights attorney Angela Price stood before the crowd. "They want you to believe this was just a one-off incident with a little girl. But in truth, it's part of a pattern, a structure of behavior we've normalized for too long. Naomi and Aria are not just a mother and daughter. They are symbols for every person who was ever told to stay quiet and let it go." Beneath her, a large banner was lifted. It wasn't just a flight, it was the line we won't let them cross again. Victor Hahn, CEO of Polaris Wings, the regional airline once undercut by Etheris's pricing tactics, issued a formal announcement. Polaris Wings will no longer partner with Etheris Air for code-share agreements until their internal culture is reformed. And we call on all other airlines to do the same. Suddenly, waves of corporate action followed. Logistics companies, retail partners, a major fashion house, even 2 global hotel chains issued statements announcing a pause in collaborations with Etheris. Etheris Air, once the poster child for luxury in the skies, was now facing the one thing no airline can survive: loss of public trust. Naomi Ellison was no longer just a mother defending her daughter. She had become the voice of millions, those who were doubted, dismissed, or pushed to the back row, simply because they didn't look the way others expected. And now those same people were stepping forward. Not to apologize, but to reclaim their rightful place in the sky. At Etheris Air's executive office in Chicago, veteran CEO Charles Vance slammed his palm onto the table. Stock prices were dropping, the media had turned on him, passengers were canceling flights, and a child and her mother were shaking his empire. "She thinks she can manipulate the market with media buzz," Charles growled at his legal counsel. "We'll show her this empire doesn't topple that easily." That same week, his counterattack campaign began. Tactic 1: Reputation assault. A wave of articles began surfacing across major financial platforms, questioning the stability of Ellison Capital, suggesting Naomi Ellison was acting on emotion rather than investment logic. Tabloids joined in, dredging up photos of Naomi from 15 years ago, startup-era parties, long-dismissed rumors, unsubstantiated whispers. One headline screamed, "From angel investor to avenging mother, is Naomi Ellison burning cash for personal revenge?" Tactic 2. Financial isolation. Etheris discreetly pressured its partner banks to re-evaluate credit lines tied to Naomi's network. Several investment funds aligned with Ellison Capital began delaying disbursements, and business partners entered a state of polite hesitation. Naomi received a not-so-subtle message from one financial institution: "If you step back now, we're still open to cooperation. But if you go further, expect an audit." Tactic 3. Systemic weaponization. A lawsuit was filed in federal court. Etheris accused Ellison Capital of market manipulation, alleging they had deliberately triggered a trust crisis for the purpose of a hostile takeover. The complaint was over 200 pages, filed simultaneously with the SEC, FTC, and the Department of Justice. Charles Vance added one more card to the deck: a subpoena summoning Naomi and Aria for a federal hearing, accusing them of disrupting flight order. But Naomi had seen it coming. As soon as the lawsuit was filed, civil rights attorney Angela Price, who had won dozens of discrimination cases, held a press conference. "This isn't a legal dispute. This is an intimidation tactic against a woman who dared to expose the truth." At the same time, Ellison Capital announced the appointment of Dr. Lydia Harper, global aviation strategy expert, as lead restructuring advisor. On CNN, Dr. Harper spoke clearly: "We're not just investing in an airline, we're investing in trust, and trust can't be bought in court." Naomi didn't respond with anger, she responded with strategy. She appeared on Bloomberg, unshaken, unapologetic. Answering every question directly, she concluded, "If racial discrimination doesn't make people ashamed, perhaps financial losses will." Charles Vance thought his counteroffensive would break her, but every move only elevated Naomi. From investor to industry reformer to the unmistakable leader of an aviation revolution, the glass tower of Etheris Air's Chicago headquarters gleamed under city lights, but inside the air was thick with tension. An emergency board meeting had been called after the company's stock plummeted nearly 40%, and Naomi Ellison's countersuit rocked the entire aviation industry. In the executive boardroom, Charles Vance stood at the head of the table, his face ice cold. Around him were familiar faces: major shareholders, in-house attorneys, a few loyalists still holding on. But many had started leaning toward a new force in the room: Naomi Ellison. The door opened. Naomi entered, polished, poised, razor-sharp. Behind her walked Angela Price, Dr. Lydia Harper, and the legal and financial team from Ellison Capital. "I'm the shareholder currently holding 41.7% of Etheris Air," Naomi declared, her voice calm and commanding. "And I'm here to formally propose a leadership change for the company's survival." A wave of whispers swept through the room. Naomi placed a thick binder on the table. "This is an internal report that was suppressed. It contains dozens of discrimination complaints that were dismissed, falsified investigations, and evidence that, under Mr. Vance's leadership, the executive team issued covert directives to preserve first-class optics by closely monitoring passengers of color and those deemed visually incongruent." A voice interrupted. "These are serious allegations. Do you have direct proof?" Naomi nodded. The door opened again. Elise Gardner and Marcus Trent, the flight attendant and lead purser from the now infamous flight, entered, pale and visibly tense. "You've both been summoned as witnesses," Angela stated. "Please tell the board what you were instructed to do." Elise glanced around the room. After a long, pressured silence, she exhaled. "We were informally trained to maintain standards in premium cabins, and that meant monitoring people who didn't look like the majority." Marcus lowered his head. "I followed directives from above, once I asked about it, and was warned that those who don't fit don't last long." A heavy silence blanketed the room. Naomi stepped forward. "You'll find in your hands a copy of an email signed by Charles Vance, sent just 3 days before the flight my daughter Aria and I boarded. It includes this line: 'Ensure premium image isn't disrupted by off-standard appearances.'" Charles's face froze. A major shareholder stood. "I can no longer support this leadership team after what I've just heard. I propose a vote of confidence in the current executive board," another added. "I second Ms. Ellison's motion," said a third. The vote began. Each ballot cast was met with held breath. Finally, the result was announced. The board votes to remove Mr. Charles Vance from the position of CEO, with a majority of 11 to 2. Charles shot to his feet, face flushed red. "You'll regret this. One child being offended is not a reason to erase a lifetime of work." Naomi met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "This isn't about one child. It's about thousands of passengers who've been hurt and never had a voice." Security escorted Charles Vance out of the room. Naomi remained, standing at the center of the boardroom as sunlight streamed through the tall windows behind her. It was not just illumination, it was the dawn of a new era. That afternoon, the news traveled faster than any broadcast signal. Charles Vance had been fired. News outlets, social media, and financial bulletins lit up a billionaire woman had ousted the CEO of Atheris Air, not for profit, but for principle. At the boardroom on the 48th floor, Naomi Ellison was officially appointed interim chair of the board. She made no effort to hide her goal: to reform the system from its roots. Within minutes of the closed session vote, she announced her first major decision. "I propose we change the name Atheris Air. This name is tied to a past of cover-ups and coded exclusion. From today forward, the airline will be known as Lumina Air, a name that reflects light, transparency, and our commitment to human dignity." The board nodded unanimously. The tense air from just hours before now lifted, replaced by a quiet sense of release. That same afternoon, Elise Gardner received an official notice from HR. "You are being placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Salary remains intact. A final decision will follow a comprehensive audit of our customer service ethics and training practices." Elise sat quietly in her apartment, watching the news replay the viral video of Aria Ellison. Her past words, laced with doubt, bias, and condescension, now played on every network. Her face was no longer that of a flight attendant. It had become a symbol of something much larger and much darker. Elsewhere, Marcus Trent, the lead flight purser, removed his ID badge and laid it on his desk. He hadn't been forced to resign, but he knew he had stood on the wrong side. "I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I thought I was defending procedure, but in truth, I was defending privilege." He submitted his resignation and left behind a final note: "If you truly want to change the airline industry, don't overlook the silence. like I once did. A week later, Lumina Air held its official press launch in Seattle, the same city where Naomi had once landed with tear-filled eyes, holding her daughter close. Behind her stood the new logo, two wings open wide, catching the light, and a slogan, "Everyone belongs in the sky." Naomi spoke before hundreds of reporters. Lumina Air is not just an airline, it is a space where every person, regardless of race, income, or origin, is treated with respect. And this is not an empty promise. We are implementing independent human rights oversight, blind recruitment protocols, and a community-monitored feedback system. Beside her stood Angela Price, who would lead the Internal Equity Council, and Dr. Lydia Harper, a strategist from Global Air, who would spearhead operational reform. Rival airlines quickly followed suit, announcing overhauls to their own policies, pledging to learn from the Lumina model. The industry had never pivoted this fast, and it all began with a purple backpack, yanked from the overhead bin. Naomi stood in front of the first Lumina Airjet prototype, evening light catching the silver logo on its sleek body. She smiled, resting her hand on the newly engraved words, "The first flight isn't always smooth, but sometimes it's the turbulence that takes us farther." A door had closed on an old system and opened wide for millions. People who had once been treated as if they didn't belong. Seattle. The grand auditorium of Lumina Air glowed with light on its global launch day. International media, major investors, human rights organizations, and representatives from pilot and flight attendant unions filled the room. But the central figure of today's ceremony wasn't a CEO or a donor. It was a 12-year-old girl, Aria Ellison, the girl whose purple backpack was yanked from an overhead bin, now stood before the microphone. Behind her was the new Lumina Air logo. Hundreds of eyes watched. Naomi sat silently in the front row, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Aria walked on stage in a simple dress, the purple designer backpack strapped over her shoulders. The birthday gift from her mother, the very object once ripped from her reach, as if she didn't deserve to own it. She gently placed the bag atop the podium. A small gesture, but the entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath. "I don't know how to speak like grown-ups," Aria began, voice trembling slightly. "I just know how to tell the truth." Her voice wavered, but her eyes were steady. "That day, I just wanted to fly with my mom. I followed all the rules. But my backpack was pulled down like it held something dangerous. But the thing people feared wasn't the backpack." A heavy silence swept the room. Aria looked straight into the cameras. "I cried, but then I saw my mom stand up, not to fight for me with anger, but to show me I didn't have to apologize for existing." She took a deep breath and smiled. "Today I brought this backpack back, not to get justice for myself, but to send a message to every kid out there. You don't have to be whiter, you don't have to be richer, you don't have to apologize for being different. If you want to fly, you deserve to fly. You don't owe anyone proof." The first applause came from a tech crew member in the back corner. Then it rippled outward. By the second minute, the entire auditorium was on its feet, thunderous applause echoing off the walls. Naomi's cheeks were soaked with tears. But she wasn't crying from pain. She was crying from restoration. That very day, Aria's speech exploded across social media. Communities of color shared it under the hashtag #AriaCanFly. News outlets ran headlines like, "A 12-year-old just taught the airline industry a lesson in dignity." Days later, a major airline announced an internal overhaul, citing Aria's speech as its inspiration. from a single unjust gesture. A child once deemed out of place had risen to speak on behalf of millions locked out of doors that should have always been open. 6 months after Aria's speech, Naomi Ellison and her daughter boarded the inaugural commercial flight of Lumina Air, a journey from Seattle to Houston, retracing the route that once left them wounded. But this time, everything was different. The newly redesigned Lumina Air cabin wasn't just luxurious, it radiated a spirit of equality. There were no segregated aisles, no invisible barriers between classes. Every passenger was welcomed with genuine smiles and eye contact from the flight crew, each one trained under the new compassion-based program, funded and overseen by Naomi herself. Naomi and Aria sat by the window, the very same row where a storm had once begun. Today, through that window, they watched another Lumina jet take off, its silver body glinting in the sun, bearing a new message in bold lettering. Everyone belongs in the sky. Naomi turned to Aria. The girl was smiling, her hand gently resting on the purple backpack that now lay safely on her lap. No words were needed. Her gaze said it all. She no longer feared the sky. And more importantly, millions of others would never again have to fear being judged, pulled down, or erased for who they were. From the speaker above came the captain's voice. "Welcome aboard Lumina Air. Today we're not just flying you to a destination, we're flying this industry toward its values. Please fasten your seatbelt, because this sky now belongs to all of us." A soft ripple of applause spread through the cabin. An elderly woman with warm brown skin leaned over from a nearby seat and said to Aria, "You may not realize it, dear, but you've opened the skies for more people than you know." Aria simply smiled, not the smile of a child who survived a storm, but the smile of someone who had lit the path through it. The plane lifted from the runway, climbing into the air. Sunlight poured through the window, casting its glow onto the purple backpack, once the symbol of a wound, now the emblem of rebirth. Naomi reached for her daughter's hand. In that moment, she knew. What they had done wasn't just about justice. It was about recharting the course for an entire generation. And from this day forward, no one would ever be pulled down from the sky again. Naomi Ellison never set out to be a hero. She only wanted her daughter, Aria, to sit peacefully on a flight, carrying the purple backpack her mother gave her without being doubted because of her skin or how she looked. But when that backpack was pulled down, an entire system was exposed. Naomi didn't choose to file a lawsuit. She chose to change an entire industry. This story isn't just about one mother and her child. It's about everyone who has ever been looked at with suspicion and still stood up to reclaim their rightful place in the sky. If you believe that everyone deserves the right to fly, let this story continue to be shared, because no one should ever be pulled down just for daring to rise.